In the untamed expanses of 1880s Montana, Clara Whitmore steps off the train with nothing but a letter and shattered dreams. The man who promised to marry her never appears, leaving her stranded in a town where whispers travel faster than tumbleweeds. Her past in an orphanage becomes the kindling for cruel gossip, marking her as deserted before she can even begin her new life. But fate has other plans when Elias Grant, a widowed rancher nursing his own wounds, offers her sanctuary on his remote homestead. What starts as a marriage of necessity slowly blossoms into something neither of them expected to find again: hope. Could two broken souls, brought together by circumstance, help each other heal the scars of their past? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The station master's office felt smaller with each passing hour. Clara smoothed her grey travelling dress for the 100th time, her fingers brushing against the crumpled letter in her pocket. Outside, the Montana sun had begun its slow descent, painting long shadows across the wooden platform where she'd stood just hours before, hope still bright in her heart. "Miss Whitmore?" Station Master Henry Jenkins cleared his throat, his weathered face creased with concern. Perhaps there's been some delay with the roads. Spring thaw can make travel difficult." The kindness in his voice only made the humiliation sharper. Clara withdrew the letter, its creases worn soft from repeated reading. "Mr. Davidson was quite specific about the date, sir." Her voice remained steady, though her hands trembled slightly. "April 15th, 1880, the 3 o'clock train." Through the office window, she caught fragments of whispered conversations from townspeople passing by. Their glances, quick but heavy with judgment, told her that word of her situation had already spread through Silver Creek. "Came all the way from Boston. Mail-order bride, raised in an orphanage, I heard. Davidson wouldn't want that sort." Mrs. Jenkins appeared in the doorway, her kind face flushed from hurrying. "Henry, I've prepared the spare room." She turned to Clara, maternal concern radiating from her plump frame. "You'll stay with us tonight, dear. No arguments." Clara wanted to protest, to maintain what little dignity remained, but exhaustion and reality were setting in like the evening chill. "You're very kind, Mrs. Jenkins, but I wouldn't want to impose—" "Nonsense," Mrs. Jenkins interrupted, already gathering Clara's carpetbag. "Besides, Martha's made her chicken and dumplings, and I won't have them go to waste." As Clara followed Mrs. Jenkins through the station's back door, she felt eyes upon her. Turning slightly, she caught sight of a tall figure on horseback at the edge of town. Even at this distance, there was something striking about his solitary presence. He sat straight-backed on a dark horse, his face shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. For a moment, their gazes met across the dusty street, and Clara felt an inexplicable shiver that had nothing to do with the evening air. "That's Elias Grant," Mrs. Jenkins said softly, following Clara's gaze. "Keeps to himself mostly since the tragedy. Runs the big ranch north of town." She patted Clara's arm. "Come along now, dear. Things will seem brighter after a hot meal and a good night's rest." Clara doubted that, but as she followed Mrs. Jenkins toward the promise of warmth and kindness, she tucked the crumpled letter deeper into her pocket, trying to bury the dreams it had once contained along with it. Behind her, the figure on horseback remained still, a silhouette against the dying light, as if watching over the quiet scene of her disappointment. Morning arrived, with the clatter of wagon wheels and murmured conversations beyond the Jenkins' spare room window. Clara dressed methodically, each button and fold of her navy blue dress a small act of defiance against the circumstances that had brought her here. In the small mirror above the wash basin, she noted the shadows beneath her eyes, but straightened her spine nonetheless. The gleam of metal caught her attention as someone passed beneath her window, a man's hand resting on his saddle horn, a gold band still encircling his finger. The same rider she'd noticed yesterday, though today the morning light revealed what dusk had hidden. a face carved by grief, but softened by something else. Kindness, perhaps. "Mr. Grant's come to speak with Henry," Mrs. Jenkins said from the doorway, making Clara start. "First time he's been to town in weeks." She hesitated, then added, "He lost his Sarah and their little one to influenza 5 years ago. The town thought he'd sell up and leave, but he stayed. Just stop living among folks is all." Clara absorbed this information silently, understanding all too well how loss could reshape a life. The orphanage had taught her that lesson early. Downstairs, the station master's office door opened. Heavy boots crossed the threshold, followed by a voice that carried clearly, deep but gentle, like distant thunder without the threat of storm. "Jenkins, I heard about the young lady. Elias. Good morning. Yes, Miss Whitmore. I have a proposition. Would you fetch her?" Clara's hands stilled on her dress. Mrs. Jenkins touched her shoulder gently. "You don't have to speak with him if you don't wish to, dear." But Clara was already moving toward the stairs. She'd learned long ago that fate sometimes spoke through unexpected voices. The station master's office seemed different in morning light, less a place of humiliation and more a crossroads of possibility. Elias Grant stood by the window, his broad shoulders blocking the sun. When he turned, Clara saw that his eyes were the color of prairie sage, and they met hers directly. "Miss Whitmore." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair streaked with silver. "At the temples. I apologize for the early hour. No apology needed, Mr. Grant." His fingers moved unconsciously to the gold band on his left hand, turning it once. "I'll speak plain, if you'll permit it. I have a ranch 10 miles north. Good land, good water, growing operation. I need—" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "I need a partner. Someone with a clear head and steady hands. Marriage would give you protection from gossip and a roof over your head. Give me someone to help build something worth leaving behind." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken things. Clara studied him, noting the way he stood, straight but not rigid, confident but not commanding, a man used to responsibility, but not to asking for help. "And if I'm not suited to ranch life? Then we'll find you passage wherever you wish to. Go with my word that you'll not leave here with your reputation damaged." He met her gaze again. "I'm not offering romance, Miss Whitmore. That part of me died with Sarah, but I'm offering honest work, a respected place, and a chance to build something real." Clara moved to the window, aware of both men watching her. Outside, Silver Creek was coming to life. Women heading to the general store, men gathering at the bank, a community she could be part of or be ostracized from. "I have conditions," she said finally, turning back to face him. "I'll not be a servant in my own home. If we do this, we're partners in truth, not just name." Something flickered in his eyes, respect perhaps, or recognition of a spirit as independent as his own. "Agreed. And the ring." She gestured to his left hand. "I'll not ask you to remove it, but I will ask for honesty between us always." His hand went to the gold band again, but this time his touch was deliberate. "Some promises don't end with death, Miss Whitmore, but they don't have to prevent new ones from being made." Clara nodded, understanding in her bones what he wasn't saying. This wouldn't be a love match, but it could be something equally valuable. A partnership built on mutual respect and shared purpose. "Then, Mr. Grant, I accept your proposition." Jenkins cleared his throat. "I'll draw up the papers. Reverend Mills, who can perform the ceremony this afternoon." As arrangements were made around her, Clara watched Elias Grant's reflection in the window. He stood as straight and solid as an oak, but she caught the slight tremor in his hand as he replaced his hat, a reminder that beneath his composed exterior, he too was taking a leap of faith. Some marriages were born of passion, others of convenience. But perhaps, Clara thought, the strongest were built on something else entirely, the courage to begin again. The journey to Elias Grant's ranch stretched across 10 miles of Montana territory, each hoofbeat marking time between Clara's old life and whatever lay ahead. She sat straight-backed in the wagon beside her new husband. The words still felt foreign in her mind, watching the town of Silver Creek shrink behind them like a fading dream. The afternoon ceremony had been brief, witnessed only by the Jenkins, Reverend Mills, and the dust motes dancing in the church's filtered light. Now, as the sun began its westward slide, Clara found herself studying the man beside her, noting how his hands held the reins with the same quiet confidence he seemed to carry in everything. "There," Elias said, breaking the comfortable silence. He nodded toward a rise ahead. "Grant's Rest, named by my father when he settled here in '62. The homestead emerged from the rolling prairie like a painting slowly revealed. A solid two-story house of weathered wood and native stone stood proud against the sky, its windows catching the late sunlight. A large barn, newly painted red, anchored a collection of outbuildings. Fields stretched toward the horizon, and in the distance, cattle grazed on green spring grass. As they drew closer, Clara noticed details: smoke rising from the chimney, curtains in the windows, a small vegetable garden outlined with whitewashed stones. Signs of a home, not just a house. "Mrs. Whitaker comes up from town twice a week to help with the housekeeping," Elias explained, helping her down from the wagon. "And there's Turner and Matthews, my ranch hands, good men." As if summoned, two figures emerged from the barn. The older one, his face weathered as saddle leather, touched his hat. "Welcome home, Mr. Grant." "Ma'am." He studied Clara with kind eyes. "Tom Turner at your service. That gangly one there's young Joe Matthews." The younger man, barely out of his teens, shuffled his feet. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Grant." The name struck Clara like a physical thing. Mrs. Grant. She was Mrs. "Grant now. Come," Elias said softly. "I'll show you the house." They crossed the yard, boots crunching on gravel. On the wide porch, Elias paused, his hand on the door. "I had Mrs. Whitaker air out the rooms, the master bedroom." He hesitated. "I've moved my things to the room down here. You'll have privacy." Upstairs, Clara appreciated both the gesture and the unspoken message it carried. This marriage might be real on paper, but its boundaries would be respected. Inside, the house spoke of both care and absence. The furniture was solid and well-maintained, but there was a stillness about the place, as if it had been holding its breath. Late afternoon light slanted through clean windows, illuminating a parlor with comfortable chairs, worn books on shelves, and Clara stopped. There, on the mantel, a photograph in a silver frame caught her eye. A woman with laughing eyes held a small child on her lap, both of them smiling at someone beyond the camera's view. Sarah and their daughter, Clara realized. Elias's first family. She turned to find him watching her, his face unreadable. "They should stay," she said quietly. "They're part of this home's history." Something in his shoulders eased, though he didn't speak. The kitchen beyond was large and well-equipped, with a cast-iron stove and a pump for water. "Mrs. Whitaker keeps it organized her own way," Elias said. "But it's your kitchen now if you—" "I want it." "I do," Clara replied. "I learned to cook at the orphanage. Sister Mary Catherine said I had a gift for it." It was the first time she'd mentioned the orphanage without flinching, she realized. Here somehow, it felt less like a burden to be hidden. Upstairs, the master bedroom was simply furnished but comfortable, with a large bed, a dresser, and a window seat overlooking the ranch. Clara's carpet bag, all she had brought from her old life, looked small against the handmade quilt on the bed. "I'll have Turner bring up water for washing," Elias said from the doorway. "Supper's usually at 6, but we can adjust that." "6 is fine," Clara replied, running her hand along the smooth wood of the dresser. "Mr. Grant, Elias, thank you." He tilted his head slightly. "For what?" "For offering more than shelter. For offering purpose." Their eyes met in the fading light, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the first thread, of a connection neither had expected to find. A horse nickered in the yard below, breaking the moment. "I should help Turner with the evening feeding," Elias said. "Make yourself at home, Clara. This is your place now, too." After he left, Clara stood at the window watching him cross the yard. The sun was setting, painting the world in shades of gold and promise. Below her, the ranch hands were leading horses into the barn, and somewhere in the distance, a meadowlark called to its mate. "Home," she whispered, testing the word. It felt right somehow, like a key finally finding its lock. The first week passed. In a rhythm of discoveries, each one carefully noted in the leather-bound journal Clara had found in her dresser drawer. At first, she'd hesitated to write in its pristine pages, but something about its presence felt like an invitation. Now, by lamplight, she recorded the day's events, her pen scratching softly against paper. "Learn to work the pump without flooding the kitchen," she wrote. "Mrs. Whittaker showed me where the preserved vegetables are stored in the root cellar. The sound of the wind here is different from Boston. It has conversations with the prairie. Grass." She paused, considering her next words. Elias takes his coffee black, 2 cups before dawn. He reads the newspaper from front to back, starting with the livestock prices. When he speaks to the horses, his voice changes, softer, like he's sharing secrets. These small observations filled her pages, building a portrait of her new life piece by piece. Some entries were practical, the location of tools, the schedule of ranch work, recipes Mrs. Whittaker shared. Others were more personal, things she noticed but never spoke aloud. He still sets 2 places at breakfast, even when he knows he'll be eating alone. The morning routine had developed naturally. Clara rose early, finding comfort in the quiet hours before dawn. She'd come downstairs to find the kitchen stove already warm, Elias sitting at the table with his coffee and newspaper. Their first attempts at conversation had been awkward, but gradually silence had become comfortable. This morning she set a plate of fresh biscuits on the table. Elias looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," she said simply, pouring herself a cup of coffee. "The kitchen feels more like mine when I'm using it." He broke open a biscuit, steam rising. "These remind me of my mother's. Is that a good thing?" A rare smile crossed his face. Very good. She was known for her biscuits all the way to Helena. Clara sat across from him, adding the information to her mental collection. It was the first time he'd mentioned his mother. Outside, Turner's voice, carried from the barn, followed by the sounds of morning work beginning. Elias finished his biscuit and stood, reaching for his hat. "I'll be checking the north pasture fence today. Might be late for supper." Clara nodded, then gathered her courage. "I thought I might ride out later, learn more about the ranch. If you think that would be appropriate." He studied her for a moment. "You ride?" "The orphanage had 2 horses for deliveries. Sister Mary Catherine taught us all." Something shifted in his expression. Respect, perhaps. "Turner can saddle Belle for you. She's gentle but sure-footed." He paused at the door. "Just stay within sight of the house for now. It's easy to lose direction out here." Later, astride Belle, Clara understood what he meant. The prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, the spring grass rippling like water. She kept the house in view, as promised, but allowed herself to explore the immediate surroundings. Belle seemed to know every dip and rise in the land, moving with quiet confidence. Near noon, she spotted Elias in the distance, a solitary figure against the sky. He sat motionless on his horse, watching her. Even from afar, there was something striking about his stillness. Then he raised his hand in greeting, and she found herself returning the gesture before he turned back to his work. That evening, as Clara prepared supper, she heard boots on the porch. Elias entered, bringing the scent of sage and open air with him. He hung his hat by the door, a simple gesture that suddenly seemed profound in its domesticity. "Turner says you have a good seat on a horse," he said, washing up at the pump. "Belle took to you." "I enjoyed seeing more of the ranch," Clara replied, sliding a pan of cornbread into the oven. "It helps to understand what everyone's working for." "And what do you think we're working for?" The question surprised her. She turned to find him watching her intently, his face still dampened from washing. "A future," she said finally. Something larger than ourselves. He nodded slowly, as if she'd confirmed something he'd been wondering about. Supper smells good. It'll be ready soon. She hesitated, then added, I made enough for Matthews and Turner too if they'd care to join us. Another look crossed his face, one she couldn't quite read. I'll let them know. Later, recording the day in her journal, Clara added one final line. Tonight, for the first time, the dining room held voices other than our own. The house seems to be remembering how to breathe. The seed catalogue lay open on the kitchen table, its pages dog-eared and worn from frequent consultation. Clara traced her finger down columns of carefully illustrated vegetables, while Elias leaned over her shoulder, his presence warm in the morning light. The south field needs rotating, he said, his breath stirring a loose strand of her hair. What we plant there matters. Beans, Clara replied, tapping the page. They'll put nitrogen back in the soil. And here, she flipped to another marked page. Henderson's new variety of sweet corn. The orphanage garden taught me that much. At least, she felt, rather than saw, his nod of approval. These moments of shared purpose had become more frequent, the space between them gradually filling with something like comfort. Spring planting drew everyone into its rhythm. Clara found herself in the fields alongside Turner and Matthews, her skirts practical now, her hands learning the feel of soil and seed. Elias worked nearby, his shirt sleeves rolled up, showing forearms tanned by sun and work. My father would turn in his grave, he said during a water break, watching Clara tap seeds into neat rows, seeing the mistress of Grant's rest with dirt under her nails. And what would he say about the master working alongside his hands, she countered, accepting the dipper he offered. A rare chuckle escaped him. Fair point. Their eyes met over the water dipper, and something sparked between them, a shared joke, a moment of genuine warmth. Clara felt colour rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with the spring sun. Matthews chose that moment to call from across the field, breaking the spell. Mr. Grant, that new stallion's acting up again. Elias's face shifted back to its usual, serious lines. Duty calls. But his hand brushed her shoulder as he passed, the briefest touch, yet it lingered like sunshine on her skin. The days lengthened, filled with the 1,000 tasks spring demanded. Clara's muscles ached in new ways, but satisfaction ran deeper than the pain. Each evening, she watched green shoots break through dark earth, life asserting itself in orderly rows. One evening, as sunset painted the fields in gold, she found Elias standing at the edge of the south field, studying their work. She joined him, comfortable now in the silence they often shared. You've surprised everyone, he said finally, a Boston lady taking to ranch life. Perhaps I was never much of a Boston lady to begin with. She smiled slightly. The orphanage made sure we could work. Sister Mary Catherine said idle hands were the devil's workshop. Wise woman. He turned to face her, his expression serious. Clara, I want you to know... He stopped, seeming to search for words. What you've done here, how you've handled everything. I made you a promise about partnership. You've more than held up your end. The praise warmed her more than it should have. The ranch is teaching me who I really am, she said softly. Who I was meant to be, perhaps. Something shifted in his eyes, a depth of feeling that made her breath catch. For a moment she thought he might say more, might even reach for her. Instead, he looked back at the fields, but his voice carried an emotion she hadn't heard before. We should order those Henderson seeds. See what else you can make grow here. That night, Clara added the seed catalogue to her hope chest, pressing it between pages of her journal. More than a simple list of plants, it had become a symbol of possibilities, of things that, with care and patience, might flourish in unexpected soil. Later, lying in her bed above the quiet house, she heard Elias's boots on the porch below, his nightly check of the property. The sound had become as familiar as her own heartbeat, a reminder that some things could grow without being planted, like trust, like understanding, like feelings that neither of them had expected to take root in the fertile ground of their arranged marriage. She turned her face to the window, where moonlight silvered the new-planted fields. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate, a lonely sound made less lonely by its answer. Clara smiled in the darkness, understanding at last that some seeds were planted by fate itself, waiting only for the right season to bloom. The church bulletin board caught Clara's eye as she and Elias stepped down from the wagon. Among the various announcements, Ladies' Aid Society meetings, barn-raising notices, prayer circles, one small card stood out: annual spring social, all welcome. But it was the hastily added note beneath that made her pause. Committee chairs already filled. She might have missed the meaning, if not for the whispers that followed them into the church. 3 months of marriage had taught her to read Silver Creek's subtle language of exclusion. Married a stranger. That poor man, still wearing Sarah's ring, raised with no proper family. Elias's hand found the small of her back, steady and warm through her best dress. It was their first time attending services together, his first time in years, she'd learned, and she felt the weight of every stare. Mrs. Grant. Reverend Mills greeted them at the door, his smile genuine at least. "We've missed you these past weeks." "Spring planting," Elias replied simply, but his tone carried a quiet challenge. Inside, they found a pew near the back. Clara was conscious of how they must look, the widowed rancher and his mail-order bride, his wedding ring still gold, hers newly silvered. But when Elias helped her with her hymnal, his movements carrying the same gentle courtesy he'd shown since. Their first day, she lifted her chin. Let them watch. The service passed in a blur of prayers and songs, but it was afterward, during the traditional gathering on the church lawn, that Clara felt the full force of the town's judgment. Women who had been friendly during her first days now found reasons to turn away. Men spoke to Elias about cattle prices while pointedly ignoring his wife. "Clara," a familiar voice cut through the tension. "Clara Grant?" Martha Jenkins hurried across the grass, her round face beaming. "I've been hoping you'd come to town. Henry, look who's here." The station master appeared behind his wife, smiling warmly. "Miss Whitmore, Mrs. Grant, I mean. You're looking well. Ranch life seems to agree with you." "It does," Clara said, feeling Elias shift closer to her side. "We've just finished the spring planting." Mrs. Abernathy, head of the Ladies' Aid Society, didn't bother to hide her skepticism. "Surely you don't mean to say you've been working in the fields?" Before Clara could respond, another voice joined the conversation. "She has indeed." Mrs. Whitaker, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "And I've never seen Grant's Rest running smoother. The vegetable garden alone would put yours to shame, Margaret Abernathy." A murmur rippled through the gathered crowd. Mrs. Whitaker, with her decades of service to the town's leading families, carried weight that couldn't be ignored. "Well," Mrs. Abernathy fumbled, "I'm sure we all want to see the ranch prosper, of course, though some might say a woman's proper place is wherever she makes it." Elias's voice was quiet but carried clearly. "My wife is not just mistress of Grant's Rest. She's my partner in all things." The declaration hung in the air like summer lightning. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest, not from embarrassment but from something deeper, pride perhaps, or the knowledge that in this moment they truly stood together. "Partner enough to join the quilting circle?" Mrs. Jenkins asked brightly, breaking the tension. "We meet Thursdays, and we'd love to have you." "I'd like that," Clara said softly, feeling Elias's hand brush against hers. The ride home was quiet, but not uncomfortably so. As the wagon rolled past greening fields, Clara finally spoke. "Thank you for what you said." Elias kept his eyes on the road, but his voice was warm. "I only spoke the truth." Still, she smoothed her skirts, choosing her words carefully. "It means something, having someone stand beside you." He glanced at her then, his eyes holding hers for a long moment. "Yes," he said simply, "it does." That evening, as Clara prepared for bed, she found the church bulletin she'd tucked into her pocket. Looking at it now, the carefully worded exclusion seemed less important. She had found her place, not in Silver Creek social circles perhaps, but in something far more meaningful, a partnership built on respect and growing trust. She placed the bulletin in her journal, not as a reminder of rejection, but as a marker of the day her husband had claimed her as his equal before all the world. Outside her window, the night wind whispered through the newly planted fields, carrying the promise of growth to come. The barn door hung askew, its ancient hinges groaning against the rising wind. Clara stood in the kitchen doorway, watching thunderheads build in the western sky, dark and heavy with promise. In her years at the orphanage, storms had meant huddling in the dormitory, saying prayers with Sister Mary Catherine. But here on the open prairie, storms were different beasts entirely. "It's coming fast!" Turner's shout carried across the yard. He and Matthews were already securing loose equipment, their movements quick and practiced. "Might be a big one, Mrs. Grant." The afternoon had turned an eerie shade of green, and Clara could taste metal on the wind. Elias had ridden out at dawn to check on distant cattle. He should have returned by now. Lightning split the sky, followed almost immediately by thunder that shook the house to its foundations. The first heavy drops began to fall. As Clara made her decision, she grabbed her shawl and hurried toward the barn. "Mrs. Grant!" Matthews called out in alarm. "You should be inside." "The new foal," she called back. "He'll panic in this storm." The young horse had been born just weeks ago, still weak and uncertain on his legs. She'd been the one to help birth him, her first time assisting with such a thing. Now he was her responsibility. The barn's interior was already dark with approaching storm shadow. Clara found the foal's stall easily. He was whinnying in fear, pressing against his mother's flank. Speaking soft words of comfort, she began checking the stall's security. A massive crack of thunder sent the animals into a frenzy. The damaged barn door slammed against its frame repeatedly, each impact like a gunshot. Clara knew she should return to the house, but the terrified foal held her in place. "Easy now," she murmured, stroking his quivering neck. "Easy, little one." The storm's full fury hit like a physical blow. Rain hammered the roof, wind howled through every crack, and the barn door threatened to tear free completely. Clara could barely hear her own voice over nature's rage. Then, through the chaos, came a sound that made her blood run cold. The distinct crack of splitting wood. She looked up just as a section of the roof began to give way. "Clara!" the voice cut through. The storm's roar. Elias stood in the doorway, rain-soaked and desperate. Their eyes met across the barn's length, and in that moment she saw naked fear on his face. "Don't move," he commanded, already moving toward her. Another crack of splintering wood punctuated his words. The next few moments blurred together. Elias reaching her, his arms pulling her away from the stall, the sound of timber giving way. They stumbled backward as a portion of the roof collapsed, sending straw and debris raining down where she had stood moments before. The foal screamed in terror, but his stall had been spared. Clara found herself pressed against Elias's chest, his heart pounding beneath his sodden shirt. His arms were still around her, holding her with the intensity that had nothing to do with physical danger. "What were you thinking?" His voice was rough with emotion she'd never heard before. "The foal! Damn the foal!" His grip tightened. "Do. You know what it did to me, riding up and seeing you in here, with the roof about to—" He broke off, his whole body trembling. "I can't lose. I can't do that again." The words hung between them, heavy with meaning. Clara became acutely aware of how close they were, of the way his hands splayed across her back, of the warmth of him, even through wet clothes. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't think—" "No," he cut her off, but gently now. One hand moved to her face, brushing back wet hair. "You did exactly what I would have done, what Sarah would have done. That's what terrifies me." The storm still raged outside, but in that moment the world had narrowed to just this. His touch on her face, the look in his eyes, the way time seemed to stop around them. Elias, a shout from outside broke the spell. "Mr. Grant, Mrs. Grant, you all right in there?" Elias stepped back slightly, but his hand found hers in the darkness. "We're fine, Turner. Stay in the house. We'll wait it out here." They spent the next hour securing what they could in the barn, working together in the storm-dark space, moving around each other as if they'd done this 1,000 times before. The damaged door became their primary concern, and together they managed to brace it against the wind's assault. When the storm finally passed, leaving behind the clean smell of rain and ozone, Clara stood in the barn doorway, surveying the damage. The broken door would need replacing, but the rest was manageable. Behind her, the foal nickered softly, alive and unharmed. Elias joined her, his shoulder brushing hers. Without speaking, he reached down and took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. They stood that way for a long moment, watching the storm move east across the prairie, carrying with it something old and bringing something new in its wake. The yellowed newspaper clipping fell from between the pages of Clara's journal, drifting to the floor like an autumn leaf. She hadn't opened that particular volume since leaving Boston, hadn't wanted to revisit those memories. But now, preparing for her weekly trip to town with Mrs. Whittaker, she'd felt compelled to look back. Tragedy strikes prominent family. The headline declared, "Whitmore heir and wife perish in fire, infant daughter sole survivor." Clara's hands trembled as she picked up the clipping. 23 years had passed, yet the words still held power. Below the headline was a photograph of a grand house in flames, and beneath that a smaller picture of a well-dressed couple, her parents, though she had no memory of them. "Clara," Elias's voice carried up the stairs. "The wagon's ready." She quickly tucked the clipping away, but not before catching the date, September 15th, 1857. The day her life at the orphanage began. In town, Clara noticed the stairs had changed since the storm. Word of her actions in the barn had spread, as news did in small communities. Now the whispers held a different tone. Saved that foal. Could have died herself. True partner to him. Mrs. Whittaker smiled knowingly as they loaded supplies. Amazing how near tragedy changes people's minds, though some of us never needed convincing. They were nearly finished when Clara heard a familiar name that stopped her heart. Whitmore Estate, floated from the telegraph office. Boston lawyers inquiring. The world tilted slightly. Clara steadied herself against the wagon. "Child." Mrs. Whittaker touched her arm. "You've gone white as chalk. I need to see that telegram." Inside the telegraph office, the operator knew better than to refuse the request of Elias Grant's wife. The message was brief but clear. Boston lawyers seeking Clara Whitmore, heir to Whitmore Estate. Previous inquiries to orphanage unsuccessful. Any information valuable? "There's more," the operator added. "Been coming in for weeks. Seems the Whitmore fortune's been held in trust all these years. They're looking for the baby that survived the fire." Clara felt the weight of the newspaper clipping in her pocket. All these years she'd thought herself alone in the world, save for the sisters who raised her. Now the ride home was silent. Mrs. Whittaker respecting her need to think. At the ranch, Clara found Elias in the barn, mending the new door himself, despite offers from Turner to hire a carpenter. "Something's happened," she said quietly. He set down his tools immediately, giving her his full attention. She withdrew the newspaper clipping, smoothing it carefully before holding it out. "I should have told you before about who I was." Elias read the article slowly, his expression unchanging. When he finished, his eyes met hers. "The baby. You." She nodded. "The sisters named me Clara. Whitmore was all I had of my family. And now," she explained about the telegram, the lawyers, the fortune held in trust. "What will you do?" His voice was carefully neutral. "Do with the money? With Boston?" He turned slightly, adjusting the door hinge with more force than necessary. "You could have any life you wanted." Understanding dawned. "You think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" a fortune, a place in society, everything you lost the day your parents died. Clara moved closer until she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the tools. "Elias, look at me." He turned, and she saw in his eyes the same fear she'd glimpsed during the storm, fear of losing something precious. "I am who I am because of that fire," she said softly. "The sisters who raised me, the skills they taught me, the strength they helped me find. It all led me here, to this ranch, to you, Clara. I don't want Boston." Her voice grew stronger. "I want our vegetable garden, and the foal who still needs me, and Sunday suppers with Turner and Matthews. I want to fix that door together, and plant next year's crops, and build something real. With you." The tools clattered to the ground as Elias reached for her, his calloused hands framing her face. For a long moment, he simply looked at her, as if seeing her fully for the first time. "I want that too," he whispered hoarsely. The newspaper clipping fluttered forgotten to the barn floor as he drew her closer. When his lips found hers, it was gentle at first, then deeper, a kiss that spoke. Of home found, not riches lost, of choosing love over legacy, and finding both in the same moment. Later, Clara would write in her journal about choices and destiny, about how sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't what's left to you, but what you build yourself. The newspaper. Clipping? She pressed between the pages, not as a reminder of what she'd lost, but as proof of how far she'd come to find where she truly belonged. The leather-bound ledger lay open on the kitchen table, its fresh columns filled with Clara's neat handwriting. She'd taken over the ranch's books shortly after the storm, and now, as harvest approached, the numbers told a story of promise. "Best yield we've had in 5 years," Elias said, leaning over her shoulder. His presence was familiar now, welcome. Since their kiss in the barn, touch had become easier between them. A hand at the small of her back, fingers brushing while passing. The coffee pot, shoulders touching as they reviewed the day's work. "The Henderson corn exceeded expectations," Clara replied, tapping the column of figures, "and the beans restored the soil, just as I'd hoped. Next year—" She stopped, feeling his smile against her hair. "Already planning next year. Shouldn't I be?" His arms slipped around her waist, drawing her back against his chest. "I love that you are." The word hung in the air between them, not yet spoken directly but growing stronger with each passing day. Clara covered his hands with hers, feeling the strength in them, the years of work and care. Outside, the September sun gilded the fields ready for harvest. Turner and Matthews had ridden into town for supplies, leaving the ranch quiet save for the distant lowing of cattle and the wind in the corn. "We should start cutting tomorrow," Elias said, but made no move to release her. "Weather's holding. I'll have Mrs. Whitaker help me prepare extra food. The men will need it." He turned her, gently to face him. "You don't have to work the harvest yourself. No one would think less." She silenced him with a finger to his lips. "I'm your partner, remember, in all things." The pride in his eyes made her heart swell. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth coursing through her. The next days passed in a blur of activity. Clara worked alongside everyone else, bundling wheat and stacking corn. Her muscles ached, but satisfaction ran deeper than any discomfort. This was their harvest, the first fruits of their shared labor. Even the town's attitude had shifted. When they drove in with the first loads of grain, Clara noticed the changed greetings, the respectful nods. Mr. Jenkins even asked her opinion on crop prices, while Mrs. Abernathy inquired about her preserving methods. "Quite a difference from spring," Mrs. Whitaker observed, helping Clara load preserves into the wagon. "Amazing what a good harvest and honest work can do for people's minds." But it was more than that, Clara knew. It was the way she and Elias moved together now, the quiet confidence they shared, the obvious care between them. Silver Creek might have doubted their marriage of convenience, but no one could doubt what it had become. One evening, as sunset painted the stubbled fields gold, Clara sat at the kitchen table updating the ledger. The final figures surprised her. "Elias!" she called, and heard his bootsteps on the porch. "Come look at this!" He entered, still dusty from the day's work, and bent to study the neat columns. She watched understanding dawn on his face. "We can pay off the seed loan," she said softly, "and have enough to expand the herd in spring." His hand found her shoulder, squeezed gently. "You did this. Your planning, your work." "We did this," she corrected. "Together." He pulled her to her feet, then one hand settling at her waist while the other cupped her cheek. Dust and sweat and end-of-day stubble couldn't hide the tenderness in his face. "I never thought I'd find this again," he said roughly. "After Sarah, I thought that part of my life was over. Then you stepped off that train." Clara's heart thundered in her chest. "Elias, I love you." The words came out clear and strong, like a truth too powerful to contain. "Not because you're good with numbers, or work like a man twice your size, or charm every ranch hand and townsperson who meets you, though you are, and you do." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I love you because you made me want to live again, not just survive." Tears blurred Clara's vision, but she smiled through them. "I love you too, not because you saved me from scandal, or gave me a home, or stand beside me against every whisper and doubt, though you did, and you do." She leaned into his touch. "I love you because you let me become who I was always meant to be." The ledger lay forgotten as he drew her into a kiss that tasted of sunset and harvest dust and promises kept. Outside, the wind rustled through empty fields, carrying away the last echoes of their solitary lives and welcoming the fullness of what they'd grown together. The first snow of winter found Clara in the attic, dust motes dancing around her as she opened an old trunk. Inside, carefully folded quilts told stories of generations past. Some were practical, made for warmth alone, while others held artistry in every stitch. At the bottom lay one particularly beautiful piece, intricate patterns of blue and cream, edged with delicate handwork. "That was Sarah's wedding quilt," Elias said from the attic stairs. She hadn't heard him come up. "Her mother made it." Clara's hand stilled on the fabric. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have—" "No." He crossed to kneel beside her, his hand covering hers on the quilt. "I'm glad you found it. It should be used, not hidden away up here." She studied his face in the weak winter light, filtering through the attic window. Months ago, such a discovery would have brought pain to his eyes. Now there was something different, remembrance without regret, love without loss. "Tell me about her?" Clara asked softly. It was the first time she dared to ask directly. Elias settled beside her, their shoulders touching. "She loved spring. Best said it was when the world remembered how to hope." His voice was gentle with memory. "She taught at the school in town before we married. Had a way of seeing the best in people. She sounds wonderful." She was. He turned to face Clara. "Fully. And she would have liked you. Your strength, your kindness, how you've brought life back to this place." Clara leaned into him, understanding that this moment was a gift, his past and present meeting in trust. Together, they carefully refolded the quilt and brought it downstairs. That evening, as wind rattled the windows and snow built in the corners of the porch, they sat before the fire beneath Sarah's quilt. Clara's hands were busy with her own quilting project, one she'd started in secret weeks ago. "The pattern's called Wedding Ring," she explained, showing him the interlocked circles taking shape. "Mrs. Jenkins is helping me with it at quilting." Circle. A blush colored her cheeks. "I thought, for our bed, when it's finished." Elias's eyes darkened with emotion. Since their declarations of love during harvest, they'd grown closer, but still maintained separate rooms, both understanding that some steps needed their own time. "Clara." His voice was rough. "Are you sure?" She set aside her quilting to face him fully. "I've never been more sure of anything." Her hand found his face, thumb tracing his cheekbone. "I love you, Elias Grant. Not in place of Sarah, but because of who you are, who we are together." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm that sent warmth through her entire body. "I love you." he whispered against her skin. More than I thought possible to love again. The firelight played across Sarah's quilt, its patterns shifting, like memories finding peace. Outside, the winter wind sang of endings and beginnings, of love lost and found, of hearts learning to hold both past and present with grace. Spring will come, Clara said softly, echoing Sarah's words. The world remembers how to hope. Elias drew her closer until she was cradled against his chest. They sat that way for a long time, watching the fire dance and listening to the storm. His wedding ring caught the light occasionally, not a symbol of what he couldn't let go, but of promises kept and renewed. Later that night, Clara added the final stitches to her day's work on the new quilt. Each careful pass of the needle was a prayer, a promise, a declaration of love that would warm them through all the winters to come. Above her, the old house creaked and settled, no longer holding its breath but breathing easily, like a heart finally at peace. She thought of Sarah's quilt, now draped across the back of their sofa, no longer hidden but honored, part of the home's living history. Just as Sarah would always be part of Elias, woven into who he was, who he'd become. Love, Clara was learning, didn't divide when shared. It multiplied, like quilts layered against winter's chill, each one adding its own warmth to the whole. Outside her window, snow continued to fall, each flake a tiny star falling to earth. The world was changing, wrapping itself in white possibility. Clara smiled, knowing that when spring came again, it would find them stronger together. A family built of choice and chance, of past and present, of love, lost and found and transformed. All of it stitched together with care, creating a pattern more beautiful than any they could have planned. The music box's melody filled the parlor with silvery notes, a delicate waltz that seemed to dance with the firelight. Clara held her breath as Elias lifted the lid, revealing the tiny dancers still spinning after all these years. "It was my mother's," he said, setting it carefully on the mantel beside Sarah's photograph. Every Christmas, she'd wind it up first thing in the morning. His fingers traced the worn wood. "I haven't taken it out since, well, for a long time." Christmas Eve had brought fresh snow and a gentle quiet to Grant's rest. Turner and Matthews had gone to town for the holiday, leaving them alone with the sleeping ranch and their growing tenderness. Clara moved closer, watching the clockwork dancers embrace. "It's beautiful, like you." Elias turned to her, his eyes soft in the lamplight. "I have something else for you." From his pocket he withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper and tied with string, but we agreed to wait until morning. This couldn't wait. He pressed it into her hands. "Open it." Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she untied the string. Inside lay a ring, silver and delicate, set with a single pearl that caught the firelight like a captured star. "Elias, I know I gave you a ring when we married," he said quietly, "but that was for a contract, a partnership on paper." He took the ring from its wrapping, holding it between them. "This is because I love you, because I want to court you properly, the way you deserved from the start." Tears blurred Clara's vision as he slipped the ring onto her finger above her plain wedding band. "It's perfect." His hands lingered on hers. "Dance with me." The music box played on as he drew her into his arms. They moved together in the firelit parlor, her head finding the perfect resting place against his shoulder. Through his shirt, she could feel his heart beating steady and strong. "I never thought I'd have this again," he murmured into her hair. "A Christmas that feels like home." Clara understood. The orphanage celebrations had been joyful in their way, but always tinged with awareness of what was missing. Now, in this room with this man, she felt complete in a way she'd never known possible. The music box wound down, but they continued swaying together, reluctant to break the spell. When Elias finally pulled back slightly, his eyes held a question that made her breath catch. "Clara." His voice was rough with emotion. Would you stay with me tonight?" The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. Clara reached up to touch his face, feeling the slight tremor in his jaw. "Yes," she whispered. Yes. He kissed her then, deep and tender, a kiss that spoke of patience rewarded and love finally ready to bloom fully. When they parted, both breathless, the room seemed to hold its breath with them. Elias wound the music box one more time before taking her hand. Together, they extinguished the lamps, leaving only firelight to guide them up the stairs. In the master bedroom, their bedroom now, moonlight spilled through the windows, turning the new wedding ring quilt to silver and shadow. Later, as snow fell soft and steady outside, Clara lay in Elias's arms, listening to his heartbeat and the quiet sounds of the sleeping house. Everything felt different now, transformed by love and trust and the magic of Christmas Eve. "What are you thinking?" he asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her shoulder. "About home," she replied. "About belonging." She propped herself up to look at him, taking in the peace in his face, the tender way he watched her. About how sometimes the best gifts are the ones you never thought to wish for. He drew her down for another kiss, gentle but full of promise. "Merry Christmas, my love. Merry Christmas." The music box's melody had long since faded, but in Clara's heart the dance continued. Outside, the winter night wrapped the ranch in silence and starlight, while inside, two souls who had once been lost found shelter in each other's arms. Morning would bring the exchange of carefully chosen gifts, Christmas dinner with the returning ranch hands, and the simple joy of being together. But this moment, this quiet, perfect moment of completion, was their real Christmas miracle. Clara's last thought before drifting to sleep was of the music box dancers, forever turning in their endless waltz. Like them, she and Elias had found their perfect partnership, their steps matched, their hearts beating in time to a melody that had waited years to be played again. On the mantel downstairs, the music box stood silent but ready, holding within its wooden heart the promise of many more dances to come. And beside it, Sarah's photograph seemed to smile gently, blessing the new joy that filled the home she'd once loved, a home that had finally remembered how to sing. The threatening letter arrived on a bright January morning, its envelope stark, white against the weather-worn boards of the post office counter. Clara recognized the Boston law firm's elaborate letterhead, but it was the second page that made her blood run cold. A note in different handwriting, sharp and angry. "My dear Miss Whitmore, or should I say Mrs. Grant, how convenient that you found another man so quickly after our arrangement fell through. But make no mistake, you were promised to me first. I've spent months tracking you down, and now that the Whitmore fortune has been located, I intend to claim what's mine, both the inheritance and the bride. Yours truly, James Davidson." Clara's hands trembled as she folded the papers, tucking them into her pocket before Elias could see. He was outside, discussing spring cattle prices with Turner, his face animated in the winter sunlight. These past weeks since Christmas had been the happiest of her life. Each morning she woke in his arms, their love deeper and stronger with each passing day. But happiness, she was learning, had a way of drawing shadows. The ride home was quiet, Clara's mind racing with possibilities. She should tell Elias, she knew. They'd promised honesty between them, but the protective instinct that had helped her survive the orphanage urged caution. Davidson was her problem, a ghost from her past. She'd handle it herself. That resolution lasted until evening, when Elias found her in the kitchen, staring unseeing. At the stove. "What's wrong?" He touched her shoulder, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. "Clara, you've been distant all day. Talk to me." She turned to face him, seeing the concern in his eyes, the love that had become as necessary as breathing. Wordlessly, she withdrew the letters from her pocket. Elias read them slowly, his face darkening with each line. When he finished, his hands were clenched so tight the papers crumpled. "He's in Boston," Clara said quickly. "He can't." "He's not." Elias's voice was dangerously quiet. "Turner heard in town. There's a stranger asking questions about the ranch, about you." Fear, cold and sharp, stabbed through her. "Elias, no." He pulled her close, his arms steel bands around her. "Listen to me. You're my wife. In every way that matters. In law and in love. He has no claim on you. The fortune, damn the fortune." His voice roughened. "You chose this life, chose me. I won't let him take you away." Clara pressed closer, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I'm afraid," she whispered. "Not of him exactly, but of what he might do. He's not a good man, Elias. The things I learned about him after he didn't come to the station." She shuddered. There were other women, other promises broken. Elias's hand came up to cradle her head. "Then we'll face him together. No more secrets between us, Clara, not even to protect each other." She nodded against his chest, remembering their Christmas vows of trust and honesty. "I love you," she said softly. "I won't let him destroy what we've built. He won't." Elias's voice held the same quiet strength that had first drawn her to him. "Tomorrow, we'll ride into town together. See the sheriff. Make sure he knows what's coming. Then we'll talk to Jenkins. He witnessed your arrival, knows Davidson never showed. And Mrs. Whitaker, there's not a soul in Silver Creek who'd cross her." His practical approach steadied her. This wasn't Boston, where money and social position ruled. This was Montana territory, where a person's word and work proved their worth. Later that night, as they lay together in their bed, Clara traced the lines of Elias's face in the darkness. "I should have told you immediately." "Yes." He caught her hand, kissing her palm. "But I understand why you didn't. We both learned hard lessons about protecting ourselves." His other hand found her pearl ring, spinning it gently. "But we're stronger together, love. Whatever comes, we face it as one." Clara settled against him, listening to the winter wind and his steady heartbeat. The threatening letter lay in his desk downstairs, its power diminished by shared knowledge. And determined love. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, but tonight— "Tell me again," she whispered. "You're my wife," he murmured, understanding what she needed to hear. "My love, my partner in all things, and no man, no fortune, no threat can change that." Outside, an owl called into the darkness, its cry echoed by its mate. Clara smiled, hearing in their calls the same certainty she felt in Elias's arms. Some bonds, once forged, couldn't be broken by paper threats or past claims. They were written in the heart, proven by choice and time and love tested true. The marriage certificate lay on Sheriff Miller's desk, its official seal gleaming in the winter sunlight. Next to it sat a stack of affidavits from the Jenkins, Mrs. Whitaker, Reverend Mills, and half the town, all testifying to the truth of Clara and Elias's union. "He's at the Silver Creek Hotel," the sheriff said, his weathered face grim. "Been there 3 days, watching the ranch road, making inquiries about the Whitmore inheritance." Clara sat straight-backed in her chair, Elias's hand steady on her shoulder. Through the office window, she could see Davidson himself, pacing the hotel's porch like a caged animal. He was exactly as she remembered from his tintype, handsome in a sharp way, but with something cold in his eyes that made her shiver. "He's filed a legal challenge," Sheriff Miller continued, tapping a fresh document. "Claims your marriage isn't valid because of his prior claim. But," he smiled slightly, "he's forgetting this is Montana territory, not Boston. Out here, we put more stock in actions than papers." "He's dangerous," Clara said quietly. "The things I learned about him after— there were other women, other promises, some of them disappeared." Elias's hand tightened on her shoulder. "He won't get near you." "Actually," the sheriff leaned forward, "I think he should." "Absolutely not," Elias started, but Clara caught his meaning. "You want to trap him," she said. "Let him show his true nature." Sheriff Miller nodded. "Man like that, pushed into a corner? He'll reveal himself, and I'll have deputies watching every move." The plan came together quickly. Clara would visit the general store alone, apparently alone, while Davidson was taking his afternoon constitutional. A chance encounter witnessed by half the town. As they left the sheriff's office, Davidson spotted them. His eyes locked onto Clara with an intensity that made her skin crawl. But when she looked up at Elias, saw the quiet strength in his face. Her fear transformed into something else, determination. "I won't let him hurt you," Elias murmured as they mounted their horses. "Nor I you," she replied, and meant it with every fibre of her being. The next day dawned clear and cold. Clara dressed, with care in her best blue dress, pinning her hair the way she'd worn it in Boston. But she also wore her ranch boots underneath, and the pearl ring Elias had given her gleamed defiantly on her finger. The general store was busy when she entered, Mrs. Abernathy and her sewing circle providing a perfect audience. Clara could feel their protective attention, the way they positioned themselves casually between her and the door. The bell chimed. "Miss Whitmore." Davidson's voice was just as she remembered, smooth as honey over steel. "Or should I say, Mrs. Grant?" Clara turned. Slowly. He was closer than she'd expected, but she held her ground. "Mr. Davidson, you're a long way from Boston, following my heart," he said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "And my investment. Tell me, did you think I wouldn't find you? That I wouldn't claim what's mine?" "Yours." Clara lifted her chin. "You lost any claim the day you left me standing at that station?" "A misunderstanding." He stepped closer. "One I'm here to rectify, along with this unfortunate marriage of convenience. My marriage is none of your concern." "No?" His voice hardened. "The Whitmore fortune is worth quite a lot, my dear. Did you tell your rancher about that? Or about our agreement?" "I told him everything." Clara met his gaze steadily. "About your promises, your lies, and what I learned afterward. About the other women who trusted you. The ones who vanished." Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. His hand shot out, gripping her arm. "You'll regret—" "Remove your hand." Elias's voice cut through the store like a blade. Davidson spun, releasing Clara. She hadn't heard Elias enter, but there he stood, filling the doorway with quiet menace. "This is a private conversation," Davidson sneered. "Nothing about my wife is private to you." Elias stepped forward. "You had your chance, Mr. Davidson. You chose not to take it. Now I suggest you leave while you still can." "Or what, rancher? You'll force me?" Davidson's hand moved toward his coat pocket. "No." Sheriff Miller's voice rang out as he emerged from the back room, deputies flanking him. "But I will. James Davidson, you're under arrest for attempted coercion, threatening behavior, and," he smiled grimly, "outstanding warrants from 3 other territories." The transformation in Davidson was immediate and terrifying. He lunged for Clara, a knife appearing in his hand, only to find himself face down on the plank floor, Elias's boot between his shoulder blades. "That's assault with a deadly weapon," the sheriff added conversationally, snapping handcuffs into place. "Add it to the list." Clara stood trembling, not from fear now, but from relief, as Davidson was led away. Elias gathered her close, his arms as steady as the day he'd first offered. "Her sanctuary. Let's go home," he murmured against her hair. Home. The word had never sounded sweeter. The marriage certificate remained on the sheriff's desk, but its official validation paled compared to the truth written in their hearts. Together, they had faced the shadow of the past and emerged stronger. Their love, tested by fire, had proven itself more powerful than any paper claim or forgotten fortune. The sheriff's notice made it official. James Davidson remanded to federal custody. Clara traced the words with her finger, still hardly believing it was over. The document listed his crimes across 3 territories: fraud, theft, and worse. The Whitmore fortune had been just his latest scheme, but now he would face justice for all of them. The Boston lawyers sent this. Elias handed her another letter, this one bearing good news. "The trust is yours. No questions remaining. They've arranged for the funds to be transferred to the Silver Creek Bank." Clara set both papers aside, turning to watch the February sunset paint the snow-covered ranch in shades of rose and gold. "I've been thinking about the money." "Oh?" Elias joined her at the window, his arms sliding around her waist. "The orphanage needs a new dormitory. and proper heating for winter. Sister Mary Catherine's last letter mentioned they had to turn away 3 children for lack of space. She leaned back against him. "I'd like to help." His lips brushed her temple. "Of course, and—" She turned in his arms. "I want to invest in the ranch, in our future. Perhaps buy the Thompson property that adjoins our north pasture." "Our future?" His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Something specific in mind?" Clara felt warmth color her cheeks. "The doctor in town confirmed it yesterday. I'm with child, Elias." The joy that blazed across his face took her breath away. For a moment he simply stared at her, his hands trembling slightly where they held her. "A baby." His voice was rough with emotion. "Our baby." She nodded, happy tears spilling over. "Due in September, just after harvest." He pulled her close, his embrace gentle now, protective. When he finally spoke again, she heard the tears in his voice. "I never thought. After losing Sarah and Emma, I didn't dare hope." "I know." She touched his face, wiping away the moisture there. "But life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? Like a mail-order bride who finds real love, or a widower who learns to trust his heart again." Outside, the last light faded from the sky, stars beginning to emerge in the crystalline winter air. But inside Grant's rest, warmth and joy filled every corner. The sheriff's notice and the lawyer's letter lay forgotten on the table, their purpose served. The past was settled, leaving room for the future to unfold. The news spread quickly through Silver Creek, carried on the same winds that had once borne whispers of scandal. Now, though, the tone was different. Mrs. Abernathy organized a quilting circle specifically for baby blankets. Mrs. Jenkins began knitting tiny boots. Even Turner and Matthews took on extra work without being asked, ensuring Clara wouldn't strain herself. "You've won them all over," Elias observed one evening, watching Clara add another name to the growing list of well-wishers. "Though I'm not surprised. You won me over the same way, with grace and strength and that quiet way you have of making everyone feel at home." Clara smiled, remembering those first uncertain days. "We've come so far, and have so far to go." He rested his hand on her still flat stomach. Together, the sheriff's notice remained tucked away in Elias's desk, a reminder not of danger past, but of love that had stood firm in the face of it. Their marriage, born of convenience, had been forged into something unbreakable by choice and trust and devotion freely given. That night, as they lay in their bed beneath the wedding ring quilt, Clara listened to Elias's steady heartbeat and thought about journeys, the one that had brought her to Montana, the one that had led them to love, and the one they were beginning now. Outside, an early spring wind sang through the prairie grass, carrying the promise of green things growing, of new life stirring, of hope taking root and flourishing. "What are you thinking?" Elias murmured, his hand drawing lazy circles on her back. "About how endings become beginnings," she replied. "About how love grows in unexpected places." She propped herself up to look at him, taking in the peace and joy in his face. About how sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances. He drew her down for a kiss that tasted of promise, like taking a chance on a mail-order bride, like taking a chance on a widowed rancher. She countered softly. Their laughter mingled in the darkness, sweet and free. The sheriff's notice might have closed one chapter of their story, but the book itself was far from finished. Ahead lay spring planting and summer growth, harvest time and baby's first cry, years of love building upon love, creating a legacy neither of them could have imagined that day at the train station. Together, they had transformed a marriage of convenience into a union of hearts, proving that sometimes the surest path to happiness is the one you least expect to take. The new wedding ring caught the April sunlight, its gold band complementing the pearl ring she still wore. Clara studied it as she stood beneath the apple tree where, 1 year ago, she and Elias had first shared a true kiss. Now they stood in the same spot, but everything had changed. "I do," she had said again, just hours ago in the white-painted church, her voice strong and sure. Not for convenience or safety this time, but for love, deep, tested and true. I do, Elias had replied, his eyes never leaving hers as he slipped the new ring onto her finger, above the pearl that marked the beginning of their courtship. Now, the whole town celebrated in the ranch yard, tables groaning with food, music floating on the spring breeze. Mrs. Jenkins had outdone herself with the wedding cake. Mrs. Whitaker had arranged flowers everywhere, and even Mrs. Abernathy had admitted through happy tears that it was the most romantic thing she'd ever seen. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Grant." Elias's voice was warm in her ear as his arms slipped around her from behind, one hand resting protectively over her slightly rounded belly. "Just thinking how different this is from our first wedding." She leaned back against him, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "Though I wouldn't change that day for anything. It brought me here, to a proper celebration." His lips brushed. "Her temple, to you, to us, to everything we've built together, the ranch spread out before them, green with spring promise. The Thompson property was officially theirs now, the extra pasture already supporting an expanded herd. The orphanage's new dormitory was under construction in Boston, funded by Clara's inheritance but bearing both their names. "Dance with me?" Elias turned her gently in his arms. "Before you get too tired." The musicians struck up a waltz, and Clara recognized the melody, the same one from the Christmas music box. Elias had asked them to learn it specially for today. They moved together on the new dance floor Turner and Matthews had built, other couples joining them but keeping a respectful distance from the bride and groom. Clara's white dress, made by the ladies of the quilting circle, flowed around her, hiding but not quite concealing the evidence of their coming child. "Remember when we danced at the Harvest Festival?" Clara asked softly. How scandalized everyone was that the mysterious Elias Grant was actually smiling. He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest. "I remember watching you all evening, wondering how I'd gotten so lucky, how this marriage of convenience had become everything I never dared wish for. We both got lucky." She touched his face, thumb tracing the laugh lines that appeared more often now. "Though I prefer to think of it as blessed." The music slowed, and other dancers began drifting toward the food tables. But Elias kept holding her, swaying gently to a rhythm only they could hear. "I have something for you," he said finally, reaching into his pocket. "I've been saving it for today." In his palm lay a delicate gold locket. Inside was a tiny photograph of Sarah and Emma on one side, and on the other, a new picture of Clara taken just last week. "So our child will know all their family," he said quietly, "past and present. All the love that brought us here." Tears blurred Clara's vision as she touched the locket. "It's perfect." He fastened it around her neck, his fingers lingering on her skin. "Like you." From the crowd came calls for speeches, for toasts, for the traditions that marked such celebrations. But for a moment longer, they stood beneath the apple tree, holding each other, marveling at the journey that had brought them here. The new ring on Clara's finger caught the light again, no longer a symbol of convenience, but a testament to love, chosen, tested, and triumphant. Above them, the apple blossoms drifted like snow in the spring breeze, promising sweetness to come. "Ready to rejoin our guests?" Elias asked finally. Clara smiled up at him, seeing in his eyes the same joy that filled her heart. "Ready for everything," she said softly, "as long as we're together." He kissed her then, soft and sure, tasting of wedding cake and promise. Around them, the ranch hummed with life and celebration, with music and laughter, with the sound of family gathered and love shared. The ring on her finger, new gold gleaming, caught one final ray of sunlight before they turned to rejoin their guests. It was no longer just a band of metal, but a circle of completion, marking not where their story ended, but where it truly began. The family Bible lay open on the parlor table, its pages illuminated by autumn sunlight. Clara's hand trembled slightly as she made the entry, her normally neat handwriting betraying her emotion. "Sarah Elizabeth Grant, born September 15, 1881, to Elias and Clara Grant of Grant's Rest. Below this fresh inscription were older entries. Elias's birth, his first marriage to Sarah, little Emma's birth and death, and then the painful blank spaces that had marked his years of grief. But now, new joy filled the pages, written in ink. "Still drying? She has your eyes," Elias said softly from his chair by the fire, where he cradled their daughter. The baby slept peacefully, one tiny hand curled around her father's finger. "And your strength? Did you know she grabbed the doctor's spectacles right after she was born?" Clara smiled, remembering that moment amid the pain and triumph of birth. "She knows what she wants, like her father, like her mother," he corrected, his voice warm with pride. The harvest had waited for Sarah's birth, the whole ranch holding its breath until her first cry rang out. Now the fields lay golden and ready, but Elias had insisted on waiting another day, wanting this time to simply be with his family. Turner and Matthews had taken charge of the preliminary work, proving themselves more than hands now. They were. Family too. Proud uncles already wrapped around Sarah's tiny fingers. Mrs. Whitaker had moved in temporarily to help, her practical love filling the house with comfort and care. "I've been thinking," Clara said, closing the Bible carefully, "about names and legacy." "Oh?" Elias looked up from their daughter's sleeping face. "Sarah Elizabeth, we're honoring both our pasts. You're Sarah and my mother Elizabeth from the newspaper." "Story." She moved to join them by the fire, her body still tender but healing. "But she'll make her own story too. She'll know where she came from, but she'll be free to become whoever she's meant to be." Elias caught her hand, drawing her down onto the arm of his chair. "Like her mother did, coming west to find herself?" "Like we both did," she corrected gently, "finding ourselves by finding each other." Baby Sarah stirred, her eyes fluttering. Open, deep blue like her father's, but with a spark of her mother's determination already visible. Clara reached for her, and Elias transferred their daughter with the natural grace of a man who'd once known this dance, now learning its steps again. "I received a letter from Sister Mary Catherine," Clara said, as Sarah settled against her breast. "The new dormitory is almost finished. She says the children call it Grant's Hope." Elias's arm slipped around them both. "A good name." "Yes." Clara leaned into his embrace. "Hope is what brought me here. What helped you open your heart again. What gave us this miracle." Outside, the harvest moon was rising, full and golden over the ripened fields. Soon the work would begin again. The eternal cycle of planting and growth, of reaping what was sown with care and patience. But now, in this quiet moment, 3 generations of love shared the firelight, past, present, and future, bound together in the pages of the family Bible. "Read me the entry again?" Elias asked softly. Clara smiled, understanding his need to hear. "It's spoken, to make it more real with words. Sarah Elizabeth Grant, born September 15, 1881, to Elias and Clara Grant of Grant's Rest, our daughter." His voice held wonder still, even after 2 weeks. "Our legacy." Clara touched the baby's cheek, though not our only one. She was thinking of the ranch, flourishing under their shared care, of the orphanage dormitory that would shelter generations of children, of the way their love had transformed not just their own lives, but touched countless others, from the ranch hands who'd found a family to the townspeople who'd learned to see beyond their prejudices. The family Bible held these truths between its pages, each entry a testament to love lost and found, to hope reborn, to legacy created not just through blood, but through choice and devotion. Sarah Elizabeth stirred again, her tiny mouth forming a perfect O as she yawned. "She'll know all of it," Elias promised. "The full story, how her mother came west as a mail-order bride, brave and beautiful, how her father learned to live and love again, how sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as life's greatest challenges. And she'll write her own chapters," Clara added, "just as we did." Together they watched their daughter drift back to sleep, the firelight casting gentle shadows on her perfect face. The family Bible lay nearby, its pages filled with endings and beginnings, with names and dates that told the story of love's endurance, of faith rewarded, of hope fulfilled. Outside, the harvest moon blessed the sleeping ranch with silver light, while inside, a family born of courage and convenience, shaped by love and choice, held each other close, adding their own shining page to the eternal story of hearts finding their true home. The ranch deed spread across Elias's desk, its fresh ink glistening in the late afternoon light. 2 names now graced the document as equal owners: Elias and Clara Grant, proprietors of Grant's Rest. 5 years had transformed not just their marriage, but the ranch itself, expanding it into one of the territory's most prosperous operations. Clara stood at the window, watching their daughter Sarah chase butterflies in the kitchen garden. At 5, she was a perfect blend of both parents, Elias's blue eyes and Clara's determined spirit, equally at home with books or barn cats. Behind her toddled 3-year-old Thomas, named for Turner, who'd become far more than a ranch handover. The years. The lawyer said it's all proper now, Elias said, coming to join her, equal partners in name as well as deed. Clara leaned back against him, his arms settling naturally around her growing belly. Their 3rd child was due in winter, a fact that still filled them both with wonder and joy. "We've been equal partners since the day I stepped off that train," she reminded him. "This just makes it official." He chuckled, the sound rumbling through his chest, like our second wedding made official what our hearts already knew. Exactly. She turned in his arms, noting the silver threading his temples now, the laugh lines deepening around his eyes. Every change was precious to her, marking their years together. The ranch had grown with them. The Thompson property was now fully integrated, its pastures supporting a prize-winning herd. The original barn had been expanded, the house had gained a new wing, and a schoolroom had been added, where Clara taught not just their children, but those of neighboring ranches. Outside, Sarah's voice rang out clear and sweet. "Papa, Mama, look what Thomas found." They moved to the porch, watching their children approach with cupped hands and shining eyes. Thomas proudly displayed a painted lady butterfly, its wings slowly opening and closing. "Gentle now," Clara cautioned, but needlessly. Both children had inherited their father's way with vulnerable creatures. "Can we show Mrs. Whitaker?" Sarah asked. "She's teaching me about butterflies." "After your lessons," Clara promised. The elderly housekeeper had become more grandmother than employee, her wisdom and love enriching their children's lives immeasurably. "And Uncle Turner?" Thomas added hopefully. "He's due back from town soon," Elias said, ruffling his son's hair. "Maybe he'll have stories from his trip." The children scampered off, the butterfly temporarily forgotten in anticipation of Turner's return. Clara watched them go, her heart full of the simple joy of this moment. "Sometimes I still can't believe it," she said softly. "All of this from what started as a marriage of convenience." Elias's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining. "Nothing about loving you has ever been merely convenient." She smiled, remembering their journey. The ranch deed was just the latest milestone in a path that had led them from strangers to partners to soulmates. Each step had built upon the last, trust growing into friendship, friendship blooming into love, love deepening into something that defied simple description. The sound of wagon wheels announced Turner's return. He wasn't alone. Matthews rode. Alongside and in the back sat Mrs. Jenkins and Mrs. Abernathy, laden with quilting supplies. Sunday gatherings at Grant's Rest had become a tradition, bringing together the family they'd built through choice and circumstance. "I remember when half of them wouldn't even look at me," Clara mused, watching their friends approach. "And now they can't imagine Silver Creek without you." Elias kissed her temple. "You changed more than just my life, love." The ranch deed might have made their partnership official, but the true measure of their success lay in moments like these. Children's laughter, friends gathering, love multiplying with each passing season. The original mail-order bride agreement, tucked away in Elias's desk, had been transformed into something far richer than either of them could have imagined. Sarah and Thomas ran to greet the wagon, their voices carrying clearly. "Uncle Turner, Aunt Martha, did you bring stories? Mrs. Abernathy, Mama's teaching us about butterflies." Clara felt the baby stir, as if responding to the joyful chaos. Elias's hand moved to cover hers, where it rested on her belly. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what, Lee? For taking a chance on a broken man and a lonely ranch? For helping me build something more beautiful than I dreamed possible." She turned to face him fully, seeing in his eyes the same love that had grown stronger with each passing year. "Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me, when everyone else saw only a mail-order bride with a questionable past." He kissed her then, sweet and familiar, yet still thrilling after all this time. They parted to the sound of their children's giggling and their friends' gentle teasing. The ranch deed would be filed away tomorrow, joining the other documents that marked their journey. The original marriage certificate, Sarah's birth announcement, in the family Bible, Thomas's christening record, and all the other paper memories they'd collected. But the real proof of their success wasn't in any official document. It was in the way Sarah's laugh echoed her father's, in how Thomas had Elias's gentle way with animals, in the community they'd built, the love they'd grown, the legacy they continued to create with each passing season. As the sun set over Grant's Rest, painting the expanded ranch in shades of gold, and promise, Clara thought about that long-ago day at the train station, how the end of one dream had led to the beginning of something far greater, a love story written not in grand gestures, but in daily choices, quiet moments, and the courage to believe that sometimes the best things in life come from taking chances on convenience that grows into destiny.